Hi, friends! I'm here today with Chapter 8 of Indian in the Cupboard. Before we start, remember we're going to set our purpose. So, our purpose today is we want to be able to answer this question by the time we're done. How has telling Patrick the truth about Little Bear impacted the story, and what problems has it caused? So, we're talking about the problems in a story. That's going to be our conflict. So, what is the conflict in this story when it is talking about Patrick and now that he knows about Little Bear? So keep that in mind as we're reading. Chapter 8 Cowboy. Omri gaped at him. He hadn't thought of this, but of course, now that he did, it was obvious. No boy who knew the secret could possibly rest until he had a little live person of his own. Patrick, it's not like you think just something to play with. Of course not. You've explained it all. Now just let me put. But you have to think about it first. No, no, stop. You can't yet. And anyway, I don't agree with you using one of mine. Omri didn't know why he was being so reluctant. It wasn't that he was mean. He just knew somehow that something awful would happen if he let Patrick have his own way. But it wasn't easy to stop him. Omri had grabbed him, but he wrenched free. I've got to, he panted. I've got to. He stretched out his hand toward the pile of soldiers again. They struggled. Patrick seemed to have gone a bit crazy. Suddenly, Omri felt the rim of the tin plate shifting from under his feet. He shoved Patrick out of the way, and they both stared downward. The plate had tipped. The fire slipped off onto the carpet. Little Bear, with a yell, had leaped clear and was now waving his arms and shouting horrible things at them. His roast meat had disappeared under Omri's foot, which instinctively stamped down on the fire to put it out. He felt a squishy feeling under his shoe. Now look, you've spoiled the meat, he shouted at Patrick. If all you can do is fight, I wish I'd never brought you. Patrick looked mulish. It was your fault. You should have let me put something in the cupboard. Omri lifted his shoe. Underneath was a nasty mess of the burned stuff. Squashed meat, the bent erector set. Little Bear let out a wail. You know, Great Spirit, only stupid boy. Fight spoil good meal. You feel shame. Maybe we can rescue it. He crouched down and disentangled the meat from the mess, burning his fingers. He tried to brush it clean, but it was no use. It was all mixed up and with the smelly stuff of the firelighter and stuck with the bits of carpet hairs. I'm terribly sorry, Little Bear, he mumbled. No good sorry. Little Bear hungry. Work all day, cook meat. Now what eat? I chop you down like tree. And to Omri's horror, he saw Little Bear run to where the battle axe was lying, pick it up, and advance toward his legs, swinging it in great circles as he came. Patrick fairly danced around with excitement. Isn't he fantastically brave, though? Much more than David with Goliath. Omri felt the whole thing was going too far. He removed his leg from harm's way. Little Bear, calm down, he said. I've said I'm sorry. Little Bear looked at him blazing-eyed. Then he rushed over to the chair Omri used as his table and began chopping wedges out of the leg. Stop, or I'll put you back in the cupboard. Little Bear stopped abruptly and dropped his axe. He stood with his back to them, his shoulders heaving. I'll get you something to eat right now, something delicious. Go and paint. It'll make you feel better. I won't be long. To Patrick, he said, Hang on, I can smell supper cooking. I'll go and get a bit of whatever we're having, and he rushed downstairs without stopping to think. His mother was dishing up nice hot stew. Can I have a tiny bit of that, Mum? Just a little bit in a spoon. It's for a game we're playing. His mother obligingly gave him a big spoonful. Don't let it drip, she said. Does Patrick want to stay for supper? I don't know. I'll ask, said Omri. Were you two fighting up there? I heard thumps. No, not really. It was just that he wanted to do something that Omri stopped dead, as if frozen to the ground. He might have been frozen. His face went cold. Patrick was up there with the cupboard. And 2 biscuit tins full of little plastic figures. Alone. Omri ran. He usually won the egg and spoon race at school sports, which was just as well. It's hard enough to carry an egg and a spoon running along a flat field. It's much harder to carry a tablespoonful of boiling hot stew steady while you rush up a flight of stairs. If most of it was still there when he got to the top, it was more than good luck because skill was he was hardly noticing the spoon at all. All he could think was what might be, no, what must be happening in his room, and how much more it would happen if he didn't hurry. He burst through the door and saw exactly what he dreaded. Patrick bent over the cupboard, just turning the key open. What? Omri gasped out between panting breaths, but he had no need to go on. Patrick, without turning around, opened the cupboard and reached in. Then he did turn. He was gazing into his cupped hands with eyes like huge marbles. He slowly extended his hands toward Omri and whispered, "Look." Omri, stepping forward, had just enough time to feel intensely glad that at least Patrick had not put a whole handful of figures in, but only had changed one. But which? He leaned over, and then he drew back with a gasp. It was the cowboy and his horse. The horse was in absolute panic. It was scrambling around wildly in the cup of Patrick's hand, snorting and pawing up one minute and down the next, stirrups and reins flying. It was a beautiful horse, snow white, with a long mane and tail, and the sight of it acting so frightened gave Omri heart pains. As for the cowboy, he too was busy dodging the horse's flying feet and jumping out of the way when it felt to notice much about its surrounding. He probably thought it was caught in an earthquake. Omri and Patrick watched spellbound as the little man in his plaid shirt, buckskin trousers, high-heeled leather boots, and big hat scrambled frantically up the side of Patrick's right hand, dodging through the space between his index finger and his thumb, swung himself clear of the horse, only to look down and find he was dangling over empty space. His hat came off and fell slowly like a leaf down, down, down to the floor, so infinitely far below. The cowboy gave a yell and scrabbled with his feet against the back of Patrick's hand, hanging on for dear life to the ridge beside his thumbnail. "Hold your hands still," Omri commanded Patrick, who was still in his excitement and jerking them nervously about. There was a moment of stillness. The horse stood up, trembling all over, prancing about with terror. Beside his hooves was some tiny black thing. Omri peered closer. It was a pistol. The cowboy had now recovered a little. He scrambled back through the finger gap and said something to the horse that sounded like, "Whoa back! Steady, fella!" Then he slid down and grabbed the horse's reins, holding them just below the horse's nose. He patted its face. That seemed to calm it. Then, looking around swiftly, but not apparently noticing the enormous faces hanging over him, he reached cautiously down and picked the pistol up from between the horse's hooves. "Whoa there! Stand!" Omri watched, like a person hypnotized. He wanted to cry out to Patrick that it was a real gun, but somehow he couldn't. He could only think that the sound of his voice would throw the horse once more into a panic, and that the horse or the man would get hurt. Instead, he watched while the cowboy pointed the gun in various directions wearily. Then he lowered it. Still holding the reins, he'd moved until he could press his hand against Patrick's skin. Then he let his eyes move upward toward the curved fingers, just level with the top of his head. "What the doggone heck?" he said. "It sure looks like a big, what am I talking about? It can't be. Heck, it just ain't possible." But the more he looked, the more certain he must have become that he was, indeed, in a pair of cupped hands. And finally, after scratching his gingery head for a moment, he ventured to look right up past the fingers, and then, of course, he saw Patrick's face looking at him. There was a petrified moment when he couldn't move. Then he raised his pistol in a flash. "Patrick, shut your eyes!" Bang! It was only a little bang, but it was a real bang, and a puff of real gun-smelling smoke appeared. Patrick shouted with pain and surprise, and would have dropped the pair if Omri hadn't thrust his hand underneath to catch them. Patrick's own hand had clapped itself to its cheek. "Ow! Ow! He shot me!" Patrick screamed. Omri was not much bothered about Patrick at that moment. He was furious with him, and very anxious about the little man and his horse. Quickly he put them down on the bed, saying, like the cowboy himself, "Steady, whoa, I won't hurt you, it's okay." "Ow!" Patrick kept yelling. "It hurts! Ow!" "Serves you right, I warned you," said Omri. Then he felt sorry and said, "Let's have a look." Gingerly, Patrick took his hand down. A drop of blood had smeared on his cheek, and by peering very close, Omri could see something very like a bee stinger embedded in his skin. "Hang on, I'll see. I'll squeeze it out." "Ow!" A quick squeeze between his thumbnails and the almost invisible speck of black metal, which had only just penetrated the skin, popped out. He shot me!" Patrick got out again in a shocked voice. "I told you! My Indian stuck a knife in me," said Omri, not to be outdone. "I think we ought to put him back. Your cowboy, of course, not my Indian." "Put him back where?" Omri explained how the cupboard could change him back to plastic again, but Patrick wasn't having any of that. "Oh, no, I want him. He's terrific. Look at him now." Patrick feasted his eyes admiringly on the cowboy, who, ignoring the giants, whom clearly thought he must have imagined, was dodgingly dragging his horse across Omri's quilt as if he were wading through the dunes of some infinite pale blue desert. Omri reached for him determinedly, but Patrick stepped into his path. "Don't you touch him! I brought him. I changed him. He's mine." "You brought him for me. You said you didn't want him." "Well, but the cupboard's mine, and I told you not to use it." "And so what if I did? Anyway, it's done. He's alive now, and I'm keeping him. I'll bash you right in if you try to take him. Wouldn't you bash me if I tried to take your Indian?" Omri was silent. That reminded him. Where was Little Bear? He looked around. He soon spotted him at the other side of the room, busy with his paints. Some beautiful, minute designs showing turtles, herons, and beavers, mainly in red and yellow, had appeared on the side of the teepee Omri had made. As Omri crouched beside him to admire them, Little Bear, without looking at him, said, "You bring food? I very soon die if not eat." Omri looked around, but what had he done with that spoonful of stew? But he soon saw that he had put it down on the table without thinking. There it sat, tilting slightly and spilling a few drops of gravy, but still steaming. He hurried to get Little Bear's, or rather Action Man's, mess tin. The paper plate had gotten all soggy, and carefully filled it with the hot, savory stuff. "Here you are." Little Bear stopped work, laid down his paintbrush, and sniffed eagerly. "Ah, good." He sat down cross-legged among the paint lids to eat, dipping some of yesterday's stale bread in as a spoon. "Your wife cook?" "Ah, no. Little Bear forgot. Omri no got wife." He ate ravenously for a few moments and then said, "Not want?" "I'm having mine downstairs in a minute," Omri said. "Mean. Omri not want wife," said Little Bear, who was now in a much better mood. "I'm not old enough." Little Bear looked at him for a moment. "No, I see. Boy." He grinned. "Big boy, but boy." He finally went on eating. "Little Bear want," he said finally, not looking up. "Another wife?" "Chief need wife. Want one beautiful. Good cook." He put his face into the mess tin and licked it clean. Then he looked up. With Iroquois, mother find wife for son, but Little Bear, mother not here. Omri be mother and find. Omri couldn't quite see himself as Little Bear's mother, but he said, I might try. I think there were some lady Indians in Yaps, but what if I get her one and make her real and then you don't like her? I like. You get. Tomorrow. Little Bear grinned at him happily, his face smeared with gravy. Patrick had come up behind him. Let's put them together and see what they do. Omri jumped up quickly. No! Why not? You idiot, because yours has got a gun and mine's got a bow and arrows and one of them's going to kill the other. Patrick considered this. Well, we could take their weapons away from them. Come on, I'm going to. And he reached toward the bed. Just at that moment, there was the sound of steps on the stairs. They froze. Then Omri swiftly moved the dressing up crate enough to hide Little Bear, and Patrick sat down on the end of the bed, masking the poor cowboy, who was still toiling along over the humps in the quilt. Just in time, Omri's mother opened the door the next second and said, Patrick, that was your mom on the phone. She wants you to come home right away. And, Omri, it's supper. And she went. Omri opened his mouth to protest, but Patrick at once said, Oh, okay. With one quick movement, he scooped up the cowboy and horse in his left hand and thrust them into his pocket. Omri winced. He could easily imagine the horse's legs being injured by such rough treatment, not to mention the matter of fright. But Patrick was already halfway out the door. Omri jumped up and grabbed his arm. Patrick, he whispered, you must be careful. Treat them carefully. They're people. I mean, they're alive. What will you do with them? How will you hide them from your family? I won't. I'll show them to my brother, and anyway, he'll go out of his mind. Omri began to think he might go out of his. He shook Patrick's arm. Will you think? How are you going to explain? What will happen? If you say you got him from me, I'll do worse than bash you. I'll ruin everything. They'll take the cupboard away. That got through to Patrick at least. He put his hand slowly into his pocket. Listen then, you can look after them, but remember, they're mine. If you put them back in the cupboard, I'll tell everyone. I'm warning you, I will bring them to school tomorrow. To school? Cried Omri aghast. I'm not bringing Little Bear to school. You can do with yours what you like about Little Bear. He's yours. The cowboy's mine, and I want him at school tomorrow. Otherwise, I'll tell. Omri let go of his arm, and for a moment they looked at each other as if they'd been strangers. But they weren't strangers. They were friends. That counts for a lot in life. Omri gave in. All right, he said. I'll bring them. Now give them to me, gently. And Patrick brought the man and the horse out of his pocket and tipped them very carefully into Omri's waiting hand. So remember, our question was, how has telling Patrick the truth about Little Bear impacted the story, and what problems has it caused? So we can see that there are definitely some problems that we faced at the end of chapter 8. Now, the word for today is probably a word you've heard. The word is anxious. So he said, in the story, it says he was furious with him and very anxious about the little man and his horse. So I'm sure you've heard the word anxious before. So think about what that means and have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, and remember to be kind.